A 2018 study published in the Archives of Women's Mental Health showed that becoming a mother can literally change your brain. And for the nuclear energy industry, that might actually be a good thing.
When we first started Mothers for Nuclear, our kids were pretty young. The mom groups and the play dates where I can't stop talking about nuclear and they're all like, what is this other mom talking? It became a part of our play dates. And now the conversation has shifted so much that we're reopening plants that shut down.
That's Heather Hoff, co-founder and vice president of Mothers for Nuclear. I sat down with Heather and Dr. Jennifer Klay, a professor of nuclear physics at Cal Poly and secretary for Mothers for Nuclear, about their work in advocacy and storytelling.
We brought about 150 students from around California. Kristen Zaitz told her story, why she supports nuclear. And the next day, we had a career fair, and it had so many students.
Today on Naked Nuclear, we're bringing you a special Women's History Month episode from the moms behind Mothers for Nuclear, bringing mentorship, the diversity of thought, and the wisdom of motherhood into the nuclear industry. So, why mothers and why nuclear? Well, Mothers for Nuclear was actually founded in 2016 on Earth Day. And for moms, protecting your children and protecting the planet makes sense. But advocating for nuclear energy?
Well, I would say that maybe moms aren't always the coolest with our vans, but I'm super excited that there's other people making nuclear cool, like young people and influencers making really cool videos about bananas and climbing containment domes and doing all the stuff that maybe moms aren't leading the conversation on. Yes, nuclear is definitely a workhorse and does so much of the results-driven cleaning up our grid that people don't realize is happening in the background. We need to talk about it more and recognize it more. Yeah, we could advocate for other clean energy, but there's a lot of people that do that already. And nuclear has been, kind of on the kind of hidden side of clean energy generation for a long time. And so as mothers and women, I think it's really vital that we speak up and share our voices and experiences and help other mothers and women feel comfortable that nuclear is the right answer and part of the solution. It's also rewarding to have our children see that we're doing something that's going to impact their futures in a positive way.
Impact the future in a positive way. That's a common theme around some of our guests we've had on the show. We've talked about 7 generations forward thinking, leaving a better legacy and future for your children. And I think with mothers, it's fairly universal to want a better world for your child. So I asked Dr. Jennifer Klay what she thinks about her children, the future generations, and especially the students that she teaches, surrounding the environment and climate change.
I have 3 children. They're all now teenagers, a 16-year-old and 13-year-old twins. And I care about the future that we're going to leave for them. I want to make sure that climate change, which is the biggest existential threat to our civilization at this time, that we address it. And so, being an advocate for nuclear is a lot about trying to show them that I am doing something to ensure a safe future and a clean energy future. Because this generation didn't grow up with the same fear of nuclear that my generation did, they're generally curious about it and want to learn more. They don't have the same preconceived ideas about it, although what they've learned from the culture is the things like The Simpsons, movies and pop culture has certainly influenced them. But I find that they're just generally curious and want to learn more. Some of my most well-attended presentations and talks are about nuclear energy because students haven't heard enough about it, and once they do, they want to learn more.
So it seems like there's a bit of a generational turning of the tides. The younger generations don't think about nuclear energy the same way older generations do. Take the Save the Diablo Canyon movement. Mothers for Nuclear was super instrumental in keeping this plant open, but there are also a lot of students that became a part of this effort. Heather actually works at Diablo Canyon, and not only is she able to give us her perspective on what it's like to work there, but also advocating for it to stay open.
It's definitely an iconic plant, and you can see some pictures back here. This is with a whale jumping in front of Diablo Canyon, and this is like this amazing poster that we made. It's surrounded by nature, it's beautiful, and it has a lot of history too of anti-nuclear protests. Some of the largest in our nation happened right here in San Luis Obispo. Speaking of generational gaps, a lot of those people are aging up now. Some of them are changing their minds still, which feels pretty amazing and impactful. Jane Fonda, when the proposal to keep Diablo Canyon running was still first floated, said, well, I don't really like it, but yes, I think we need Diablo. And that was just huge. She was in the China syndrome. It's showing a big shift. Every time I go to a classroom and talk to students, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how come I don't do this more? Because changing old people's minds is hard. Just kind of like shaping young people is just so invigorating and encouraging, and they're so curious. And so I would like to say to all people, regardless of your generation, curiosity is really key. I had to ask a lot of questions about nuclear before I was able to start kind of realizing how great it was and realizing that a lot of my fears were misplaced. Stay curious and ask a lot of questions until you get to your truth. For me, my truth is centered around nuclear energy being a huge part of our clean energy future.
I think part of that is because so many of us stood up and said we want this plant to stay open, and we were coming from so many different directions, and the Mothers for Nuclear was a new voice in that advocacy space. It gave people the opportunity to take a second look and rethink. The fact that our state government recognized the value and importance of this plant to making sure California has reliable, clean energy on the grid, able to deliver to all the people that need it, that was wonderful. We helped make it possible for them to recognize that there's public support behind this. It was really gratifying to all the grassroots efforts we put in to advocate for this, to talk to people, and to see that shift and change. It feels good to know that we made a difference.
Let's take a step back for a little bit of perspective. Right now, across the world, we're looking at reopening nuclear power plants that have been closed, shuttered, sealed up for good. And I think a part of this reason is because we're looking at the advocacy efforts around Diablo Canyon and what it took to keep this plant open. So I asked Heather, how does she organize people and gather them around to move with the same direction and goal?
I don't know. We know nothing about that.
Well, I'd say Heather is an expert at it, and she's brought a lot of people together. She brought me into the fold as well. It does take dedication, passion, and willingness to have hard conversations with people. Heather, I'm going to compliment you here. She's been a role model for so many of us in how to do this. I think we've all learned a lot together, and from her, it's amazing to be a part of this group.
Thank you. And I think that speaks to diversity of thought and why that's important. I feel like I'm a little bit bonkers sometimes. Maybe, because I've been an operator at Diablo Canyon, like it's kind of a thing. Operators are obnoxious. You got to be a little obnoxious to like keep talking about the same thing over and over and over again when everyone thinks it's a lost cause. But yeah, we need every angle of people pushing and talking about it to reach all the people that need to make a decision to change the future. And it's honestly, when I said I don't know anything about it, I'm kind of telling the truth. We decided to put our stories out there. Like, here we are. Maybe we'll do some good just by existing. And we do. People are like, Mothers for Nuclear, that's a thing. Those exist. Wow. And so just, having that name out there and that concept out there has been powerful. And then just providing mechanisms for people to write in and share their experiences is powerful. Like everyone has a story, and that's something that our nuclear industry hasn't really focused on much in the past. And at Mothers for Nuclear, we're all about storytelling. Like, who are you and what about you makes it that you support nuclear? Yeah, I think that's just very, very powerful for a lot of people.
One of the things I found inspiring when talking to both Heather and Jennifer was not only are they moms raising families and advocating for nuclear advocacy, but they're also women of science. Heather is an operator and has an engineering background working at Diablo Canyon. Jennifer is a professor of nuclear physics at Cal Poly. And so I wanted to learn more about how their background influences what they do and who they interact with.
I've been at Cal Poly since 2007, 18 years, something like that, interacting with students, doing undergraduate research. So we're an undergraduate institution and don't have graduate students. So all of our research is done with undergrads, and teaching classes and getting to know them and bringing them into this field It's been gratifying. It's something I'm very passionate about because when I was an undergraduate, I wanted to get into research and I wanted to work with people. And so I'm hoping and I try to provide that opportunity to students who, like me, might not have been the top of the class and next Nobel Prize winners, but really passionate and interested in physics and want to learn more. We didn't do a lot of talking about nuclear energy until I started being more engaged and actually became a mother for nuclear in 2016. It's part of my story, like this transformation of realizing how important nuclear energy is and the fact that it's my field of study, that I can be a voice that can help students learn more. And so I've built a lot more into it. So I would say since I started advocacy, I'm having more conversations with students. They're more interested in it. They're learning to be advocates themselves and not to be experts. I tell them you don't have to be an expert in this to be an advocate for it. And if you express to other people, hey, I'm just learning still too, but do you want to learn with me? We actually last year helped Cal Poly create a new chapter of a club called NICE, which stands for Nuclear is Clean Energy. The club is going strong and they're headed to Diablo Canyon to do a tour together in early March. And they have weekly meetings and they're really excited about it. I was doing an event where we bring students from high schools to Cal Poly to learn more about our programs. I met a student interested in nuclear physics because he saw the movie Oppenheimer, but he wanted to learn more and he's passionate about nuclear energy and nuclear physics. And I was like, come join Cal Poly, we want you. What's interesting, I think people in my generation who are in roles of being professors at Cal Poly, they may also come with preconceived notions about nuclear, even among colleagues in the physics department who aren't nuclear physicists. They just don't know very much. And their awareness of nuclear, is from the culture or from whatever their background is. And so we have conversations now more frequently about things that they don't know much about. And they come to my talks. And several of them have told me I had a negative opinion of nuclear until I started learning more and talking to you about it. You're a colleague that I respect, and you clearly have thought through this carefully and you have a lot of information that I wasn't aware of. So tell me more. They feel a bigger sense of trust because they know me, they know my expertise, and they're rethinking their own ideas about nuclear based on that. So that's rewarding.
Whether you're an 18-year-old college freshman or a tenured professor of 18 years, it is extremely challenging to be confronted with your own assumptions, especially when they might not be as accurate as you thought they'd be. But that is one of the roles and jobs of science, is to challenge the status quo. And with the help of curious, inquisitive minds, dig deeper into what is right. And sometimes these challenge our own expectations of what we think might happen.
I'd say it's been an interesting shift for me. When we first started Mothers for Nuclear, our kids were pretty young. And so it was a lot of the mom groups and the play dates where I can't stop talking about nuclear. And they're all like, what is this other mom talking, and so it just it became a part of our play dates. And I don't think anyone really expected that, including me. And when we first started, we were largely focused on saving existing plants. And now the conversation has shifted so much that we're reopening plants that shut down. We're definitely not even really talking about plants that are under threat. But largely we're shifting as an organization to a more future-looking strategy where we have to bring up the nuclear workforce so that we can build more nuclear and new nuclear, and really encouraging the future generations to help make this happen. And regarding camaraderie of women in our industry, like at the plant, when I started as an operator, I was the only female operator, and I was the first operator to ever go through pregnancy at the plant. And there's, a lot of things where I was kind of alone. It's funny, when I got my day shift job writing procedures instead of being on shift in operations, now I have a desk in the admin building, and I would go in the restroom and there would be another girl and I'd be like, hi, how are you? I'm Heather. Let's be friends. It's really great that the women that work in nuclear, we all are really supportive of each other because we recognize that there is strength in numbers, and that we do have to change some things about our culture to make it easier for women to be in these roles where we haven't historically had much of a presence. And sometimes companies don't think about all the things that are inherently built in that make it hard for a mom to be an operator. It's a pretty challenging thing and a pretty limiting set of solutions. I hope we get a lot more creative in the upcoming years and bring more women into these spaces, because I've seen the diversity of thought in an operations crew. It's way different when there's a woman or two, or hopefully a little more balance. We do a better job. We cover all the bases in just different ways, and it's really valuable.
Diversity of thought. So, what does that look like? When I started thinking about the diversity of thought, I thought of Allison Felix in the 2024 Olympics. The gold medalist launched the first ever Olympic village nursery for mothers and families with athletes who were competing. No one had ever considered having a space for children, mothers, and young parents, but a mom did.
One of the interesting things we did recently here at Cal Poly is we hosted the American Physical Society. We were a host site for one of the conferences for undergraduate women and gender minorities in physics. So we brought about 150 students from around California and the western region of the United States to our site for a 3-day conference. And we took advantage of our proximity to Diablo Canyon. And we had a plenary speaker who gave a keynote address to our students about careers in nuclear energy. That was Kristen Zaitz, another board member of our Mothers for Nuclear team, and also an employee out at Diablo Canyon. And we had her speak on Friday evening, and the students, I mean, all of us, I would say, were just totally blown away by her presentation. She told her story, she talked about the experience, why she supports nuclear. And the next day, we had a career fair, and PG&E and Diablo Canyon were there with a table at our career fair. It had so many students eager to learn more about that opportunity. And we've basically sent them more information and follow-up after the conference about internships with Diablo Canyon. That just created a lot of excitement among that group of young women who are women and gender minorities who are looking for, what am I going to do with my future, with my career? And this is now an opportunity that we showed them. And I think that was really rewarding to be a part of that from the physics department perspective, but also from Mothers for Nuclear and our connection with Diablo.
I'm not a mom yet, but I have a mother, and I'm always blown away at how much she considers the needs of myself, my brother, my sister, and the rest of my family. And so when mothers enter the nuclear scene, they start to consider things that we'd never considered before. Like, have we considered talking to communities about nuclear waste? And what even would a conversation like that sound like?
I spent a lot of years of Mothers for Nuclear kind of like, I don't want to talk about waste, I want to talk about clean power generation. Like, the waste is not a big deal. And then this kind of opportunity presented itself, and we're like, okay, we're pretty good at communicating about nuclear now. Maybe we should enter the conversation a little bit more on waste. It's one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have, and can we, go into communities and talk about that differently and help change some minds?
It was interesting this morning. I gave a presentation in a class called Energy Society and the Environment, and I was invited by the instructor to come and talk about nuclear energy. And I chose to use my time to ask them questions. And I asked the students to tell me what they knew and what they were concerned about. And long-term storage of waste was their primary concern. And so that's what we focused on as far as talking information-wise. And it connects back to our consent-based siting, what we're doing to help people understand what that is and how it's managed and what it would mean if it was brought to their community. That's a really important piece of what we're doing right now, and having those conversations is helping us be better at communicating about it and helping get that information out to people who have those concerns.
Consent-based siting. We've talked a bit about consent-based siting on the show before, but what is it again? It's the practice of engaging and talking with communities in terms of where we're going to put nuclear waste. Instead of just slapping nuclear waste down wherever we see fit, we engage with the community that's available in that area to talk and discuss what are the implications of storing waste in and around the community?
So there's 12 different teams that were awarded this grant from the Department of Energy, and they are geographically spread out, and we also want to be geographically spread out. We want to have conversations and kind of capacity building across the country. So interesting to talk about consent generally from communities on projects like this, and we just met with one of our local legislators where recently we've had a battery fire in our district, and we've had some other legislative changes that kind of take the community out of the conversation for new energy projects. And the state's like, we want to do this clean energy project. We're not even going to ask you, we're just going to do it. And so we had a great kind of opener to talk about how nuclear leads the way on the idea of consent-based siting and why that's so important, and how we have some hard lessons from Yucca Mountain to learn, and that maybe other energy types should follow in the footsteps of how to talk about all the issues, even if they're complex. Communities need to have a say, and they need to have some buy-in. Otherwise, projects are going to fail a lot.
Well, with the students, for sure, I need to close the loop with them now that we've talked about it. I gave them some information on that specific topic that they were curious about and concerned about. And I told them I would follow up later. And I think that that'll be an important way to understand what is the effectiveness of these conversations. Where are the issues that linger and still need to be addressed? One of the things we do as part of this consent-based workshops is introduce ourselves and talk about why we're there and take a snapshot of their opinions before and after the workshop to see how their opinions have evolved after those dialogues. And that's data that we're gathering and analyzing and plan to publish when it's ready.
The surveys that we've done and the data that we've collected with Robert Hayes from North Carolina State University, he's a nuclear engineering professor there. Like Jennifer said, the surveys where we kind of test what do they think before and then what do they think after we have these workshops with them have shown a lot of improvement in terms of, general attitudes towards nuclear. So we think it's working. We want to really kind of dig into why is someone concerned? What exactly are they concerned about? A lot of it is listening rather than telling someone your concern doesn't matter because it's so safe because of all these barriers and all this concrete and all this stuff. What are you really worried about? And so we've had some kind of surprising revelations on that. One guy, when we had a workshop in Salt Lake City, kept making comments about the nuclear industry and how we didn't manage risk very well, and we're doing all these dangerous things, and we're like, oh gosh, this guy is going to impact our whole workshop and everyone there who's listening. But we asked him some questions and really dug in, and he had overheard some conversations with people in advanced nuclear talking about rolling back some regulations. People outside of our industry, when they hear stuff like that, might get pretty skeptical, like, oh my gosh, that sounds scary, that's bad. And so he had this perception that we were then, able to talk about and how do we think about it? What do we see in our jobs? And really gave him some different context. And I was totally surprised at the end of this kind of tabling session that we had with him. He's like, you guys gave me some different information. I'm going to go back and re-examine my assumptions. And I was just blown away. I think it's really important to try and understand a concern before you try and address it.
If you just approach it directly with, I want to go put this waste in your backyard, what do you think of that?
Terrifying.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying. But if you start by having a conversation about what are your values and what's important to you, and then how does this potential consent-based siting, how does this repository in your community, how would that align with your values? Something I would have thought was scary and dangerous might actually be beneficial and good for my community. And I had no idea of that beforehand, but because we're talking about it, what are our values? We care about the environment, we care about clean energy, and starting from that perspective, and then bringing in the conversation about how can we support those values by doing things like placing a repository for used nuclear fuel in that community, and what would that mean? Like that's how you get to talking to people and building that trust, and it's not a direct assault.
Kind of delicate point still. I think disadvantaged communities often get stuck with these projects and pollution, and it's a huge environmental justice and social justice issue that we keep sticking them with everything that no one else wants. Now we're having the conversation like, here's why you might actually want nuclear waste and why there's like very little risk. Construction is a mess, so like the construction's a risk, but nuclear waste itself, like here's the benefits that it could give to your community and why you should definitely want that instead of a gas plant or instead of a battery storage facility. We don't want people to feel like they're getting something stuck on them, but we also want them to understand that it is actually valuable for their community, bringing in scientists, bringing in community infrastructure improvement opportunities. There's science opportunities and all these different entities that would want to take part in maybe eventual recycling of the used fuel. That could be really good for a community.
If I told you, hey, 3 miles up the road from where you live, I want to put a nuclear waste repository, what would your reaction be? What would you say to that? What would you assume? I know the knee-jerk reaction would be no, absolutely not. But would you or could you be interested in learning more about what that process would look like? That's the thing. Challenging your own assumptions is really difficult because oftentimes we don't even know what we're assuming to be true. And whether it's storing spent nuclear fuel or doing physics homework, it's really important to challenge our assumptions. So I asked Heather and Jennifer, what advice do they have for women who are considering going into this industry?
I think it's great to be willing to kind of examine your own assumptions and to do something that might not feel like you want to do in the first place. Like for me, I realized kind of recently, like I really didn't want to work at Diablo Canyon, and I was doing my best to avoid it, working at clothing stores and for the garbage company. And like finally I was like, okay. But I'm so glad that I made that leap, and I'm so glad that I kept trying through the things that were challenges out there. I remember at one point I wrote up like a whole bunch of just minor leakage on these valve stems. Like I spent all night like identifying all these valves, and the next day everyone made fun of me because they're like, don't you know you can just fix that? And I was like, no. But I kept going, and like this other operator who was my friend in my class showed me like, here's how you adjust the packing on all these valves, and we went around to all the ones that I'd written up the night before and fixed them. And I pretend to be good at mechanicking, but I'm not really. Yeah, like take a leap and have some faith in yourself that you can take the criticism and change and adjust. And I got to be really good at what I do out there. I don't know if it was the most natural fit, but I think anyone can do it if they want to and try hard.
Speaking as an educator and working with students, and specifically with women who might be interested in physics but feel like, do I belong? Is this a place for me? If I'm not an expert and understand all this right away, does that mean I shouldn't be studying this? And I had a conversation the other day with a student. I said, if you're passionate and you want to answer questions and you're curious about how the universe works, you belong here. And if you find physics hard, that is okay, because I find it hard too, and I'm an expert in physics, right? I'm a professor and a chair of a department, and that is okay. And I think that's something that I try to do, is I try to normalize that it's a hard field, and that wanting to be in it and wanting to answer questions about the universe is what makes you part of the community, because you want to be there.
This episode has been packed with so many gems, from challenging your assumptions to building inclusive communities by sharing your story. All of this with so much wisdom from two women who work in science and engineering. But now it's time to show a different side, our rapid fire questions. Heather, if you were to build a futuristic city, what features would you want in it?
Gosh, I struggle with this so much. It's a really hard question. It's not rapid fire at all, because I am like a back to nature and a small is beautiful person at heart, and like this whole like industrializing and modernizing and technology and stuff is really hard for me. So like I would build a city with small houses that are really spread out and where you don't have to see humans very much. Yeah, some clean technology, fast solutions that make lives easier. I love that.
Awesome. And Jennifer, if you had to give a TED Talk on a random subject that is not related to nuclear physics, what would you give it about?
I know exactly. Octopus and cephalopods. If I,
Oh, yeah.
if I weren't a nuclear physicist, I might have become a marine biologist and studying octopus and cephalopods.
Heather, do you have any hobbies?
Not nuclear hobbies. Again, I like being out in nature, so I love hiking and I love reading. I used to go to the park and read a lot. Maybe gonna make some time for that more this year.
Jennifer, you're taking your 3 kids on vacation somewhere. Where do you want to go?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, my 2 boys have only flown in an airplane once. So wherever we're going on an airplane because they're very excited about that. I've been thinking about a trip to Hawaii because that's where they want to go, but I was just looking at how expensive it was. So if money's no option, we're going to Hawaii.
Do you have a specific island or just like all the islands?
I've been to Maui and the Big Island, and I loved both of those. So I'd love to take my kids there so that they could experience them too.
And then Heather, this one is kind of nuclear related. Are there any stories from working at Diablo Canyon that looking back, you're like, wow, like that was a pivotal, like amazing moment?
Yeah, amazing or embarrassing. I think of when I first returned to work after becoming a mother and was trying to figure it. You mentioned breast pumps earlier, or pumping, and I had heard that we had a room specifically for this, and no one seemed to know where it was. And they're like, go ask the HR guy. So I'm like, I go to this guy's office and I walk in and I was like, I kind of heard that you might be able to tell me where the pumping room is. And his face, like I could just see like the confusion, like there's pumps in the power plant, like pumping, like what is this girl talking? Like I should have said, I'm a new mom, but I didn't give him any context. And so I was like, oh, this guy's freaking out. So I was like, for boobies. And like I even did the hand sign. I took a while to kind of come into it's all right to be a female at the power plant, and how to navigate some of these conversations is challenging, and it's okay to share those stories with people that come after you, so maybe it's easier for them even if it wasn't easy for you.
Last question for Jennifer. Your favorite meal, like you're going out. I feel like I gave you all the travel and dining. Yeah, your favorite go-to meal.
I love Thai food, so I would go out for Thai food. Pad see ew, cashew nut chicken, I don't know. There's lots of tom kha ga soup, lots of good things in a Thai restaurant, so that's where I would go.
I also love that answer. I'm a big Thai fan. My last question for both of you is for specific topics that you would like to hear on podcasts that you feel like I would like to hear more of this or that within the nuclear energy space.
I want to know how people think nuclear education should change. Yeah, because our curriculums, I think, we do some sciencey stuff and not everyone responds to that. And do we need more of how the grid works? Lots of different things about why kind of nuclear is important in the mix and how it fits into addressing climate change and what should nuclear education look like going forward?
And I would say just addressing some of the big questions people have about, the 3 main, I'll call them disasters that have occurred in nuclear in history, helping people better understand the context of those and how some of them were not severe at all, didn't cause any lasting impacts to humans. And I think dispelling some of the fear and myths around those disasters.
I want to thank Heather and Jennifer for coming on to the show, but for also being advocates, mothers, scientists, engineers, operators, doing so much impact and so much good work within the nuclear energy space, from helping students to everyday people understand what nuclear is and do it a little more clearly and without judgment. It's okay to have assumptions and challenge them. And I think they do a really amazing job at being able to provide people with better information. If you are a mother and curious to look into Mothers for Nuclear, you can find more about it at their website at www.mothersfornuclear.org, where you can get connected to their information and volunteering opportunities. This has been another episode from our Women's History Month series. All throughout March, we're going to be spotlighting amazing women in the industry, from students all the way to the president of the American Nuclear Society. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Naked Nuclear. Stay curious.